Hey, welcome to Atlanta Braves Chop Live. Today we've got a special treat for you. We have the author and one of the members of the new book, Ground Crew Confidential. We have Austin Gisriel and we have Lee Frazier. Thank you for joining the interview today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Great. So, the ground crew, the primary characters there in the book were, of course, yourself, Lee, but then also you had the master of nicknames, Fish, and Clay, and then also it's really interesting, Chip Moore, who's in the Braves front office, and thankfully, due to one of your best bosses. He was able to extend his career with the Braves and not be fired right away one summer moons ago, right?
That's correct. That's correct. We had one of those promotions that the Braves used to have, a giveaway night. I think this was seat cushion night, if I remember right, in the book. And so the Braves in those days, they would give all the promotions out as fans entered the stadium, whether it was Frisbees or bat day or seat cushion night. So everybody's got, I guess they gave out probably 30,000 of those seat cushions. And so during the game, there's a bad call down on the field. And of course, here come a bunch of the seat cushions flying out from the boo, 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 booing the umpires, all this stuff. So they send the ground crew out once again to do another dirty job. We have to go out and pick up all the cushions. And so everybody's rounding them up and everything. So the game's over. And then, at the end of the night, they don't know what they're going to do with all these cushions. There's literally hundreds of them in our ground crew room. So I think Chip asked asked Robert and Sam if he could take a truckload of them or a carload of them to his little league team or something like that. And they said, sure, take them. He stuffs them all in the car and he's getting ready to go home. And all of a sudden, our boss, Joe Shirley, comes driving in and he says, whose car is that? And Chip said, that's my car. He says, well, you're fired. Now, this is like Chip's second week. And he's been there 45 years now. So this is his second week. And he says, you're fired. He says, that's Braves property. So Robert, our boss, who always came to our rescue, steps up and says, no, Joe, he's not fired. If you have to fire him, you got to fire me. I gave him to him. That's all junk. It was going to get thrown away anyhow. So Robert basically saved Chip's job right there. And little did he know, he never had another paycheck in his life except for the Atlanta Braves.
That is amazing. I feel like as I read through the book, which is a wonderful read, there were a lot of those promos, which I think it was like trial by fire, where there's a lot of promos you all did that aren't done anymore, like seat cushion night, where those are thrown on the field, Frisbee night, where those are thrown on the field, bat night, where they make, tremendous amount of noise and are dangerous. And, so I think that while you were there was a lot of lessons learned, even concerts, the Allman Brothers concert, where there was a massive amount of glass, broken glass left all over the field, among other things.
Absolutely. And they learned their lesson pretty quick. Effective immediately, all the giveaways happened when the fans left the stadium. So they wouldn't even bring the gimmicks up there, when the tickets were being taken. We'd start hauling them up there about the third or fourth inning. So as fans got ready to leave the stadium, then they could take them and go on out the door. So they kind of got that. And of course, like you said, with the concerts, well, nobody had any experience with what they called festival seating. And that meant just sit anywhere you want on the field. Bring a blanket and bring a case full of beer, bottles, it didn't matter what, glass, all this stuff. So as you'll see in the book, we had one particular event and there were just broken wine bottles everywhere. I believe it was the Allman Brothers. And so we're scouring the field. After we finally got the just truckloads of trash off of it, we looked like one of those old police lines, down on your hands and knees, crawling, looking for clues. Well, some guy hollers, we come over there, and there's a piece of glass, I guess sticking out of the ground about 3 inches. Well, we start digging and digging, and it's underground about 10 inches, the length of a wine bottle. So you can just see in those days, Dale Murphy or somebody like that slide and make a catch.
Yeah.
So we're all thinking, holy cow. So when that happened, boy, it was double duty then. We found three total. And just little things like that you never anticipate happening in a major league field. And there it is,
There it is. That's right. And Austin, so you were charged with collecting and listening to all these stories, putting them in into the book, and as an author and somebody who's been involved in the baseball world from a writer's perspective for a long time. And also, I wanted to say, I know that your overall collective work of books includes many books around World War II and your family's experience, relatives' experience World War II. I wanted to take a second here as you all joined here on Veterans Day to thank all our veterans today. Especially, I want to thank my partner here at Atlanta Braves Chop Live, Sean O'Malley, who is an Air Force veteran. And he was not able to join this morning because he's at his daughter's school for a Veterans Day parade. So take a minute there to thank all of our vets for sure. But Austin, tell us how you got involved in the book and how the experience was from a writing perspective.
Well, it was a fun experience for sure. I mean, I got to sit back and listen to all these stories. As to how I got involved, it's a case of one of those, my wife's cousin knew somebody. So in this case, my wife's cousin, I guess he played tennis with you, right, Lee?
Well, no, he was actually my manager.
That's right. He was your boss.
Yeah,
he was your
UPS.
boss.
Yeah,
and you had mentioned to him that you were looking for somebody to put your story together. So Mike McDonald, my wife Martha's cousin, said, well, I know this guy that writes baseball books. Maybe you want to get a hold of him. So, I think Lee did his due diligence on my background and we talked, and that was actually 2 years ago this coming December. And then, fortunately for me, the guys decided, yeah, he's the one we want to tell our story. And I always liken this particular story, especially to, you build one of those freestanding stone walls. You just got to gather stones and gather them up and gather them up. And then you begin to see, oh, well, this stone fits where this stone next to this stone. And this stone would go well on top of those two stones, and just kind of put it together that way. So you hopefully have some, coherent flow to the entire story. But as I said, it was a lot of fun. We spent a lot of time on Zoom swapping stories.
Yeah, and I want to share for a second here with everybody watching just the nice cover there of the book, Ground Crew Confidential. And you can also pick this up on Amazon, either as an ebook or buy the paperback. How are things going since the publishing went out?
Very well. Very well. I think we're at 99% paperback versus ebook. A lot of people seem to like to look at that cover, and there's some illustrations inside that one of the authors, one of the storytellers, David, did. So people seem to be liking the paperback, but been very well received so far.
Yeah, that's great. I really did enjoy the read. But one thing I was going to say. I have a little ground crew experience when I was so my very first job before I could drive, I got a job here down in Columbus, Georgia, where Sean and I grew up. We've been best friends since kindergarten and Braves friends since then too, or fans rather. But my very first job was pushing an ice cream cart at the local minor league ballpark, Golden Park, back in, I want to say 91 or 92 for the Columbus Red Sticks, which was an Indians affiliate. And Sean, he was a pretty good catcher, high school catcher growing up. And he got a job there in the bullpen, just catching some bullpen one summer. But later on, when I was in college, I had actually come back to the Red Sticks and had an intern as an athletic trainer at the time. And, one of the things that I think, let me see, I think Lee, you might have actually said in the book, or one of the quotes was about getting the air under the tarp as you pull it onto the field. I think he said it has to be floated across on a ripple of air. And so, true, Georgia summer thunderstorm comes out of nowhere, and it's all hands on deck. And I was part of that, where, I remember somebody shouting at everybody, not just me, but, get air under it, pull it up, get some air under it, or it's going to basically get stuck. So That was a tough job. And I know you, how many times, I mean, you probably pulled the tarp over the field 100 times, I'm guessing.
More than that. We pulled it more, of course, when there was no game going on than any other time. We had to pull it if it was raining in the forecast overnight. You had to pull it after the game. Well, you had to get
Oh
there before,
yeah.
yeah, and then you had to take it off the next morning to fix the field and get it off before the sun rose over the top of the stadium because it would burn the field. So many times you'd pull it 4 or 5 times a day. If it was one of those typical summer days where it might rain 3 or 4 times and then the sun comes out after it. So anytime there was going to be sunshine on it, you had to get it off that field. So yeah, we were rather adept at it. And our boss had the way he would do it. Robert, the country boy, he would just yell, give it air, and scream that. So for the rest of our lives, the 4 of us, whenever there was something you had to pull, or if you're making a bed with your wife, you'd say, give it air, give it air.
Yeah, let me jump in here real quick. Just say our older daughter, Becky, who just celebrated a birthday yesterday, she worked for the Hagerstown Suns, which was a Class A affiliate in Western Maryland, and it was many affiliates. It was in Class A, and she was a promo girl. So she's dancing on the dugout and all that kind of stuff and throwing out T-shirts. But she didn't realize when the storm was coming. Just as you said, it was all hands on deck. She's like, oh, now I got to pull the tarp tonight and pick up firework debris after fireworks shows. So she got a real education in minor league baseball.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. And Lee, talking about what was said in the book, The Best Boss Ever, Robert Johnson. I could really connect with that. Myself. First of all, when it was said that he was from Waycross and the Braves used to have spring training in Waycross, Georgia, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Of course, that was when they were with the Milwaukee Braves.
Correct.
So that was really amazing to me. I learned something there, but I don't know if you caught it, but at the end of a post-game interview last year when the Braves won the World Series, Ozzie Albies quoted something that Ron Washington told them in the summer of 2021 that also echoed one of Robert's more colorful quotes that was in the book. We'll use the PG version, but he said, as far as you guys working on the field, that he only wanted to see booty holes and elbows, meaning you guys were running and working, right?
Yeah, you better be bent over, shoveling or something. That he better just see you working. He better not see you sitting or talking or anything.
Yeah, my high school football coach, also from down here in the South, he had the same, very similar, almost the same saying. Coach Pete Ingersoll, he threw shoe soles in it as well. So he wanted to make sure that we had high knees, shoe soles, booty holes, and elbows.
Robert used to tell us, you don't want to work, I don't need you. I got applications this high, people that want to work for the Braves. He said, if you don't want to work, I don't need you.
Yeah. And from a writer's perspective, I feel like this book was in the making, not just from your experiences, but almost specifically going back to the Davy Johnson complaints about the infield, and then Gary Caruso, who's with the Atlanta Journal at the time. This was even before it was the AJC, before those papers combined.
Correct.
But Gary, writing a story about that, and then Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were the one that called him back up and had a rebuttal, right?
Correct. We were sort of mad because they sort of threw us and Robert under the bus, and for no reason. He had more errors on the road than he had at home, and plus, you saw that Allman Brothers. That was 7 weeks before that. So we called the Journal-Constitution, and I mean, Caruso's right. They were down there in 20, 25 minutes. Well, you know how you get all fired up and pull the trigger on these things, and then all of a sudden the guy shows up. We're all like, oh, wait a minute. He's really here. We better back. So we didn't want to give our names. We kind of got wet feet at the last second. So I was the unidentified spokesman for the group. So we gave him all this information, and everything, and he goes back, writes it up, and of course, as you saw in the book, Louis Grizzard, of course, was the sports editor then, which is
right. Oh yeah,
we had no idea, and so he comes back. It all gets plastered out there. So the next day, one of the coach's sons worked on the ground crew, Ken Silvestri. He comes running in. He goes, guys, my dad just told me there's 50 copies of that newspaper in Johnson's locker. All the Braves are giving him the business. You know, they're all laying it in there saying, the ground crew's got you now. The ground crew's got you now. So we don't know if that's true. We do know there were 50 copies in there, but I don't know how much razzing they were doing. But it was a lot of fun to get him that. And I would say you're correct. That's where it started. We had that rebuttal. It was in the paper. He came around and apologized. But ever since then, we started thinking, you know, these stories might be entertaining to other people. Mm-hmm. So it took 5 or 6 years to work up the, I don't know, whatever the initiative to go ahead and try to put them together. I started writing stuff in 91. My 3 friends, we all started talking about it maybe 5 years ago. So
and
pretty long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great, I really appreciated you guys doing the work there and putting it together. Now, Austin, I know Gary wrote the foreword, so I'm assuming you had some interaction with him. And if so, how was that, you know, for you being a longtime baseball writer and getting to talk or work with Gary a little bit?
Yeah, that was great. And I just want to make one little correction of something Lee said when he identified himself as the unidentified spokesperson. What he means is ringleader. Okay. But yeah, Gary was very gracious and you know, he was happy to help out. And he said, oh, you know, I think I kind of almost sounds like your stereotypical, you know, movie sports writer, like, oh, I think I can give you guys something. And he did. And what he came up with, and we had no idea that we knew obviously that he had written the article on Davy Johnson,
right.
But as he mentioned then that this was his big break. Yeah. You know, that he started getting more and more assignments for the Braves. And what was it, Lee? Like 2 years later, he was the beat writer, something like
correct.
That, wasn't it?
Yeah, correct. And he was hired to cover high school football. And so this was his first big break. And really it was ours too. So it kind of came full circle after 50 years when I called him and got a hold of him via email. And then it was just kind of spooky. He said, yeah, that's me. I'm guilty as charged. You know, I wrote that article. So we started talking and telling, he didn't know about the newspapers. He didn't even know that we had gotten the raise the next day, that we weren't even making minimum wage until his article came out. So all that was new information to him. So it was pretty cool.
And what was new to us is we didn't know that was his big break until he sent us the forward.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. You know, one of the things that was mentioned in the book was that a lot of pitchers complimented you all there at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium for the mound, how great the mound was. You know, has to have something to do with the Georgia red clay that you probably shoveled tons of in your years there out on the ground crew. But what I wanted to ask was if you caught watching the last series of the season, Braves and Phillies, and then also more specifically in the NLDS with the Braves and the Phillies, boo Phillies. The Phillies pitcher Jose Alvarado, who come out of the bullpen, and every time he'd come out of the bullpen, he would have the ground crew come down there and basically repack the entire pitcher's mound. And I wanted to ask what your impressions were about that, and would that have happened in your time there back in the 70s?
Well, not to that extent, probably. There were times when a guy wanted something. If certain pitchers had reputation for really digging it up, I mean, they dig that toe hole in front of the rubber out, and then the landing area would look just like a mud puddle had been there. I mean, it was just funneled out. Certain guys couldn't hit it the same way. There were times we would come out there and rake it in a little bit and squeegee over it, something like that. And if a real egregious guy had just really dug it up, but not routinely. But each guy had his own little thing. They loved it. You could tell who had pitched the night before by the rubber on the Brave staff. Now, not so much with out of town guys, but with the Brave staff. And so, yeah, absolutely, it happened from time to time.
And speaking of Brave staff, you know, it was written in there, Austin, you wrote in there that Lee, your doppelganger is Gene Garber. And I 100% agree with that.
Oh man. Gino was great too. I mean, he treated the ground crew fantastic. Didn't say a lot, but always had a smile, some kind of a gag or something like that. I always bring Upshaw out a big old pouch of the back every night and give it to him out of the clubhouse. And he was one of those guys that you could pull for real easy. He'd have made a great ground crew guy. I'll say that. Gene Garber would have.
And as far as pitchers who were ground crewmen, you know, I think most Braves fans are familiar with Pascual Perimeter Perez. I think everybody kind of knows the story where one day he got lost on the I-285 bypass around Atlanta and maybe showed up late for a start that day. But Tella, there was a couple stories about there that Austin, you captured that oh no, Lee, if you could retell, there was the story about the incident with the gold chains, which today, you know, players with necklaces is pretty prevalent, but there was that issue or that situation. And then tell, how did that lead into Pascual Perez's guest appearance on the ground crew?
Yeah, it was a wild night. So the Perez is riding the highway. He's doing well, and the Braves are doing well, I believe, at that point. And I don't think, it might have been 82. It might have been after that. But anyway, so he's out pitching. He's doing very well for that night, but he's got his gold chain flapping around. In those days, that was against the rules. Everybody didn't complain about it, so a lot of people let it go. Well, not Tommy Lasorda. He always looked for that edge for his teams. I mean, he was famous for that. So he makes the complaint to the umpires. The umpires, you know, come out and they tell Perez he's got to put it inside of his shirt and keep it out from flashing all around. Well, the Braves announcer, Marshall Mann, happened to just tell everybody that in the stadium. He goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, Pascual Perez has had a complaint filed against him, and he's been asked that umpires have made him put his chains back inside of his shirt." And he just told that. So the whole stadium just erupts in because, you know, they just hate the Dodgers, and here's Lasorda pulling this stunt. So as soon as it happened, Fish and me, I said, "Let's go. I know what we're going to do." So we go back into the ground crew room. And you'll see in the book, we go over and cut some big old snow tire, even bigger chains, like you would, you know, chain a gate together with. It's big old chain. So we cut about 4 feet, 3 feet off of for 5 people. We cut 5 lengths. We got 5 people who are going to go out and smooth the infield between the innings, you know, mat the infield. So we all put the chains around our neck and we take off. And when you come out, you start at first base, you go to second, and you're dragging this stuff behind you. Well, as we're running across the outfield, these chains are just ching, ching, ching. Just so fans start seeing it. They start pointing. And all the Braves are starting to see it. They're out taking their in-between inning warm-ups, you know, grounders, and they're starting to point. The Braves start coming up on the top level of the dugout, and they're looking. Everybody's starting to laugh. And so we put down on the infield skin, and we're heading to second. We turn, and we're heading to third. Well, when you head to third, you're facing the visitor's dugout.
Right.
So there's Lasorda sitting up on the first step, just scowling at us. And we've all got these chains. Well, Perez has already seen us. He's warming up on the mound. He's just grinning from ear to ear. When we get there, we drop our mats on the ground. We all bend over, take a bow, and shake those chains right at Lasorda. Just ching, ching, ching. And man, so his players are all rolling. The stands are all hooting. You know, everybody's just rolling. We pick up our mats, pull around, go back off first, run off the field. We think he's probably going to come after us, you know, but he never did. To his credit, he never came after us and filed a complaint or anything. So after we did that, you know, the Braves in those days, all sports teams, they still have these kangaroo courts.
Oh yeah.
So after the game, they're going to either levy a fine because you missed a sign or something. So they had kangaroo court that night, is what we heard, and they told Perez he had to come help us out since we helped him out. So the very next night, he shows up. We put him in a ground crew uniform, and he does that thing where you pull around, smooth out the field. He looks just like one of us, you know. I don't think many of the fans knew it. Now, all the players knew it. They were just rolling, laughing, pointing. But I don't think the fans ever caught on. But that wasn't the end. He also had one more piece. When the first rain delay we had, he had to come out and help us pull the tarp.
Oh,
so
okay.
He did that as well, too. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was everybody had a hoot with it, and just good to finally get one over on Lasorda like that.
Yeah, definitely. I got the chance to meet Tommy Lasorda back in 90 somewhere in 94, I think. He was scouting down at the University of Miami. I was there with the college baseball team I was working with at the time. But, you know, there was a couple of player stories that were captured in the book. And I wanted to know, Lee, if you can tell us about how the ground crew almost thwarted Hank Aaron's 715th home run, and potentially, maybe this is dramatic, but could have ended his career. Tell us about that story.
Yeah, in those days, it was probably a very real possibility because knee surgery is not what it is today. So we had, I guess, four of us had gone around to get some what we call brick dust on a big flatbed trailer, the stuff you put around the outfield track, little granules of stuff. So we go over there and we fill up this big flatbed trailer with brick dust. And one of the guys is a new guy, he's a rookie. We call him Greens.
Mm-hmm.
So he's begging us all the whole morning, let me drive the tractor. I want to drive the tractor. Please let me drive the tractor. So finally Clay says, okay, you can drive the tractor. So we're going back around the stadium, and underneath the stadium, of course, is the road. There's like a street that goes around under the stadium, a full circle. So he's driving under there, and he's swerving back and forth, left and right, having a big time. Well, we get right by the Braves clubhouse. I guess this is 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. All of a sudden, the door opens, and two knees appear. All I see so far is two knees, and he's swerving right at them. Those two knees just stop, jerk, and freeze. And as we go by, there's Hank Aaron standing there in his pregame warmups. I mean, I'm telling you, that flatbed trailer missed his kneecaps 2 inches, if that. He was, he was teetering over it like this. So, literally, had that thing weighed 1,000 pounds. If it had hit his kneecaps right there like that, there's no doubt he'd have been out that night. And in those days, at his age, it could have been disastrous. So we going back to the ground crew room thinking we're fired once again. Here we are, fired for sure. And my friend David, it's his first day. It's like Chip's first day later on with the seat cushions. Well, David, it's his first day. He says, I don't even last one day. So he's getting fired. He thinks, we go back and we're sitting there waiting and wait. Nothing ever happens. Hank never says a word. Mr. Class, Mr. Cool, never says a word. And of course, later on, his sons ended up working with us on the ground crew, Larry and Hank Jr. And I meant to ask them. I never did. I always meant to ask them, did your dad come home and tell you that tonight that the ground crew almost took him out before the game? But yeah, that's how that happened. It was a very real, very true story and scary moment.
And how was that? I think you're maybe sitting on the tarp down one of the foul lines in the fourth inning when he hit that home run. How was it from that perspective, and what was the atmosphere like?
It was fantastic. Of course, there was a light drizzle. So we weren't allowed to go anywhere. Normally during the game, you don't have to be that close by. You'd be out behind the fence where the ground crew hangs out in a bullpen. But this night there was a light mist going, and of course, no chance of a rain out. Don't want to refund 50,000 seats. We never sell 50,000 seats in those days. In fact, the next night they sold 7,000, I think.
Wow.
After the home. So we were sitting on the tarp, and Downing throws that pitch, doesn't move a bit. It's a pretty straight looking pitch to me, comes right down to there, and Hank connects with it, and it's 25, 30 feet over the fence, and the place goes nuts. And it was just awesome to be a part of it, because I was there when he hit his 600th.
Oh, wow.
A couple other mementos, and so yeah, it was a good time, very exciting for a new baseball town. We didn't know how to act. We football town, Atlanta was, and didn't know anything about it. So.
And I wanted to talk a second about Dale Murphy, beloved Atlanta Braves player. Just a week ago, he came up eligible again for the 2023 Contemporary Baseball Era ballot for the Hall of Fame. And Austin, being a researcher of baseball, one of our interviews, if you want to catch it out there, I did interview Craig Mutter, who's the director of communications at the Baseball Hall of Fame. We talked a lot about the history of baseball there. But tell me, it was quoted in there that, I think everybody realizes, but it was quoted in there is how genuine a person Dale Murphy was. And that Fish actually said they tried him at first base, and he was equally bad over there as he was at catcher. But except for Andrew Jones, Murphy may have been the best center fielder the Braves ever had. Murphy was smooth. How was it? Just, most of us are fans. 99% of us are fans. How was the atmosphere, Lee, just seeing those players firsthand down on the field and interacting with them?
That was great, and certain guys were better than others. Back in those days, so many of them were friendly, and we parked with the players in the parking lot. The ground crew did. You don't do any of that anymore. They're so separated from everybody now, and it's necessary, I guess. But that kind of interaction was wonderful. Murphy was one of the best. I remember when Brigham Young came to Athens one year to play Georgia in football. He's over there with us the whole time, trying to get this score. He's wanting to know what's Steve Young doing? What are they doing? I can't believe Georgia's beating them. So, it's great. Nice guy. And the other guys were fantastic. Just the certain superstars did not have that ego. They'd come right up to you and sign your baseball or sign whatever you had and talk to you. Like doing magic tricks, like I told you for Bob Gibson in the book. We don't give a whole book away, I guess, but
Right.
Yeah, a guy tells you to do magic. You do a couple of magic tricks for him, and he drags you up in the clubhouse, and you're doing them for Torrey and everybody else. So straightforward guys, a lot of them, and down to earth guys.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that impressed me in listening to all the stories. And of course, it was a different era, and the money has changed things, and that's not the players' fault. I mean, they get so much money, and if the owners want to give it to them, more power to them. I'm sure Lee would have taken $1 million a year just to shovel brick dust if they'd offered.
Yep.
Right.
It's just a different world, but I think one of the things that readers will really enjoy about this book is this, as Lee said, this camaraderie between the players and the ground crew. And I think a lot of it, as I listened, my impression was, in those days, the players weren't that far removed from doing the kind of work that the ground crew was doing. So they're making, $35,000 a year, and they were going to need another career. A lot of those guys, they had off-season jobs, and that's why the World Series back in the day, when it was just the World Series, was so important, because they might double their salary with that, check from participating in the World Series. So sure. It's a very it's an era you look back on. It's a very warm time, a lot of camaraderie all the way around. And, it's also nice to know that guys I knew, as I was growing up, the names, so many of them were just decent, regular guys. I find that really one of the big thrills in covering baseball, that you meet somebody and like, yep, he could be my neighbor and I wouldn't even know the difference.
Yeah, for sure. I want to read something that you wrote, Austin, and as we come to a close here of the interview. But you kind of a summary of the book for everybody, and I'm sharing the cover there again. Again, this is available on Amazon. So the quote here, it says, "Ground Crew Confidential is the story of 4 young men who worked on the ground crew of the Atlanta Braves in the 1970s. Harvey Lee Frazier, David Fisher, Clay Jackson, and Chip Moore learned about hard work from shoveling brick dust in the Georgia sun, and about leadership from Robert, their boss, an old country boy who treated everyone, black and white, equally. Each of the 4 went on to very successful careers, and the bond they formed when their hair was long and their jeans were flared continues to grow." I just once again want to say a masterful job in collecting all those stories. Austin, Lee, you and the crew, just so grateful that you guys were able to had the idea to compile and record these things for everybody. And I'll throw in one more quote from the book about one of the most colorful characters that you mentioned on the ground crew, who was Elijah the Prophet Upshaw. As we come to a close, I thought it appropriate to kind of quote him. And he said, "Surely you come and surely you go." And so with that, thank you, Austin. Thank you, Lee. Really appreciate you guys spending some time with us here today.
Thank you. Great talking to you.
Come back anytime you want.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.